One of the first things I learned as a long-haul trucker was this: you can't always count on your phone to save you. Out on those vast American highways, cell service is a luxury. Sometimes it's a storm knocking out the towers. Other times, it's just the dead zones, those lonely stretches where the GPS freezes, and you're suddenly painfully aware of how far you are from civilization. That's why every rig worth its salt comes with a CB radio. It's old school, but when things go south, it might be the only lifeline you've got. At least, that's what I used to believe. Until the night my lifeline became the threat. It was late summer, and I was driving through the back roads of Nebraska. If you've ever driven those roads at dusk, you'll understand the stillness I'm talking about. It's the kind that's beautiful and eerie in equal measure, golden light stretching across endless cornfields, shadows growing long and lazy, until everything slowly dissolves into darkness. It was about 6 p.m. I had several hours left before my stop, but I was ahead of schedule. I figured I'd pull over for a bit, eat the sandwich I'd picked up that morning, and call my wife to check in. I eased the cherry red Mack truck onto a gravel pull-off, killed the engine, and leaned back in my seat. I watched the sun melt behind the horizon. That amber glow always reminded me of home, of porch swings and cold beer, the kind of memories that help you stay sane when your only companion is asphalt. I reached for my phone, but as soon as I unlocked the screen, I saw it. No service. Figures. I typed out a text to my wife anyway, something simple like, "Love you. Stopping for dinner. We'll call soon," hoping it would send once I hit signal again. I put the phone on the dashboard and unwrapped my sandwich. That's when I noticed it. The shift in the air. It wasn't just the drop in temperature, though it did feel a bit cooler. It was more than that. A prickling sensation crawled across the back of my neck, like static before a lightning strike. You know that feeling when someone's watching you? That. I sat up straighter in my seat and looked around. Nothing but open land. The fields were silent. Not even crickets. I told myself it was just the isolation playing tricks on my nerves. Happens to every trucker eventually. Still, I flipped on the headlights. The beams cut through the gloom in long cones, illuminating the empty gravel and the tall grass beyond. Nothing. I turned the radio on, hoping for music or chatter to ease my nerves. It was mostly static, but I caught the tail end of someone's joke on a local country station. I chuckled weakly and took another bite of my sandwich. But that unease hadn't left me. I decided not to linger. I tossed the sandwich wrapper in the bin, took a swig from my thermos, and started the engine. That's when the CB clicked. Click. A tiny noise, but unmistakable. Someone had opened the channel. I blinked and reached for the mic. It could be another trucker nearby. Maybe they saw me pulled over and were checking in. Nebraska truckers, especially on back roads, sometimes look out for one another. I pressed the button. "This is Mac Rattler. Who's out there?" No response. I waited. Static hissed gently. Then, a voice. "Where are you going?" I froze. It wasn't the voice of someone I recognized. Not a fellow driver. It was deep, low-pitched, calm, almost whispery, but not in a soft way. It was intentional. Like every word had been measured. I cleared my throat. "Sorry, who is this? You coming through Channel 19? Silence. I stared at the mic. Maybe someone messing around? There's always pranksters on open channels. CB trolls. Kids with handhelds. Then the voice came again. "I still see you." Something about those 4 words chilled me more than I care to admit. I looked in my mirrors. All 3 of them. Nothing. The road behind me stretched empty in both directions. Flat. Featureless. No headlights, no silhouettes. Just me, the road, and that voice. I tried to laugh it off. "All right, good one. You got me. Now how about identifying yourself, friend?" No answer. That's when the voice changed tactics. "You're in a cherry red Mack truck, carrying lumber to the Bayside freight yard. License plate." And then he rattled it off, number for number. I felt a cold sweat forming at the base of my spine. There's no way he could have known all that unless he was looking at me. But there was no one around. My hands gripped the wheel tighter. I flicked my high beams on. Still nothing in sight. I scanned the dashboard, instinctively checking for signal again. No service. Of course. I reached for the mic again, my voice a little more forced this time. "Look, if this is some kind of joke, I'm not laughing." "How do you know all that?" "Nothing. Just a long, quiet click. Then, "Why are you running?" the voice said. "You don't think you can escape me, do you?" My breath caught. I hadn't even realized I was accelerating. The truck was pushing 70. It wasn't intentional. I wasn't trying to run, but my body had made the decision before my mind caught up. Fight or flight. And in a big rig, flight means throttle. I looked again. Still no one. No tailgaters. No passing headlights. Just two parallel lines of road ahead, swallowed by darkness. Minutes passed. No voice. No clicks. Just the hum of tires on asphalt and the thrum of a heart pounding in my ears. Eventually, I slowed down. Forced myself to breathe. To think logically. It was a prank. Had to be. Maybe someone at the depot messing around. There are apps now, devices that can hijack frequencies. Someone with tech knowledge and a sick sense of humor. Right? I kept driving. 20 minutes later, I was almost convinced I'd imagined it. That's how these roads mess with your head. Miles and miles of solitude. And you start hearing things. Seeing things. Then the CB clicked again. That was a fun time, wasn't it? The voice said softly. Until we speak again. Then static. And just like that, it was gone. My hand shook as I reached for my phone again. This time, 2 bars. Signal was back. I immediately dialed my boss. She picked up after a couple rings. I explained everything. What I'd heard. What the voice had said. The details he'd known. I asked if anyone from the warehouse could have been pranking me. Maybe using one of the newer CB integration tools. But she sounded just as confused and disturbed as I was. No one has access to that kind of info. Not unless they're following you. But there's no one out here, I said. She paused. Then maybe they were ahead of you. Or not even near you at all. I don't know what that meant. I still don't. That night haunted me for months. Still does sometimes. Because no matter how many times I replay it, no matter how many logical theories I come up with, CB spoofing, a rogue employee, some kid with a scanner, I can't explain one thing. How he knew exactly when I got back on the road. Exactly when I sped up. Exactly where I was. Unless he was watching. Unless he was waiting. And every time I hear that little CB click in the middle of a quiet drive, I brace myself. Because what if it's him again? What if he's not done? And what if next time, he's not just a voice? The truth is, most long-haul truckers will tell you the same thing. We look out for each other. There's an unspoken bond among us on the road. It doesn't matter if you're a seasoned driver hauling freight coast to coast or a rookie with your first load. We help when we can. Especially when you're stuck on the side of a dark road with hazard lights blinking like a silent cry for help. But that code, the code of the road, is exactly what nearly got me killed. It happened just outside of Flagstaff, Arizona. Middle of nowhere, on a stretch of highway that was dead quiet after 9 p.m. I was hauling steel beams, headed toward Albuquerque, and planning to rest for the night once I crossed into New Mexico. The desert night had settled in, dry, still, with a full moon low in the sky casting silver across the red rock. It was beautiful in a desolate sort of way. I had the radio turned low, and a thermos of lukewarm coffee in the cup holder. The hum of the tires and the distant chorus of insects were the only sounds for miles. That's when I saw it. A truck pulled onto the shoulder ahead. Hazards flashing. A white Freightliner with its hood up. It looked like the driver had broken down, maybe overheated. I slowed down as I approached and flicked my lights to signal. As I passed, I saw a guy mid-30s, maybe early 40s, standing beside the cab, waving his arms. He was wearing jeans, a ball cap, and a reflective vest. Looked legit. So I did what any decent driver would do. I pulled over. I put the air brake on, grabbed my flashlight, and hopped down from the cab. As I approached, the guy met me halfway between our trucks. He was nervous, talking fast, thanking me over and over. Said something about his alternator going out, I remember. Battery was dead, couldn't get his radio to work. No cell signal. He asked if I could give him a quick jump or at least take a look under the hood. I'm not a mechanic, but I've done my fair share of roadside fixes. I agreed. We walked to his truck. The hood was popped, but as I leaned forward to shine the light into the engine compartment, everything went black. I woke up confused. Dizzy, slumped against a wall. But it wasn't a wall. It was metal. Cold, hard. The scent of grease and dust filled my nose. My head throbbed and my arms were numb. My legs, too. I blinked hard, trying to orient myself. That's when the panic hit. I wasn't in my truck. I was inside a trailer. The floor beneath me vibrated ever so slightly, just enough to know that it was moving. They were driving. I had been tossed, ambushed, and now I was locked in someone else's trailer. God knows where we were going. I had no idea how long I'd been unconscious. Minutes? Hours? I tried to move. My wrists and ankles weren't tied, but I was groggy, like I'd been drugged or stunned more than once. I fumbled for my phone. Miraculously, it was still in my pocket. 17% battery. No signal. But I knew one thing. Eventually, we'd hit a patch of coverage. And when we did, I needed to be ready. I crawled to the back of the trailer, hoping to find a seam of light, a gap, anything. But it was sealed tight. Just metal walls, a metal floor, and the sound of tires humming against the highway. I stayed low, focused on breathing, on staying alert. I had no idea who had taken me or why. Robbery? Human trafficking? Revenge? Was this even just one guy? Or a crew? Time passed in agonizing silence. Then, one bar. I didn't wait. I opened my texting app and typed out the first thing that came to mind. Help. Taken. In trailer. Don't know where. Was in Flagstaff. Think I'm heading east. I sent it to my wife, hoping it would go through the moment the signal stabilized. I followed it with another. Tell cops. Use GPS. I'm in a trailer. Moving. Please. I watched the spinning wheel next to the text. Sending. Sent. A moment later, the bar vanished. Signal gone. But it had made it out. Now I had to wait and survive. I don't know how long I was in that trailer. Hours blurred. I drifted in and out, keeping myself pressed into the corner, listening for every creak of the floor, every rumble of tires, every time the truck slowed or turned. I didn't hear voices. Didn't hear anyone open the trailer. Just movement. Until, finally, the vibration stopped. I braced myself. This was it. I heard a door slam. Footsteps. The lock clicked, and the trailer door began to open. Light spilled in, blinding me for a second. Two men stood there. One of them I recognized, the guy with the reflective vest, the one who had waved me down. The other guy was thinner, twitchier. He had a switchblade in one hand and a crowbar in the other. They looked surprised to see me awake. The twitchy one muttered, thought he'd be out longer. The other one grunted, let's just get it done. I didn't wait to hear what it was. I lunged, full adrenaline. No plan. I barreled into the bigger guy, knocking him off balance, and we both tumbled out of the trailer and hit the pavement. I rolled, ignoring the pain shooting up my side, and took off running, right into headlights. A police cruiser. I dropped to my knees as the lights flared and tires screeched. Two officers jumped out, weapons drawn, shouting commands. The two men behind me froze. One ran. The other raised his hands, stammering. But it was over. The cops were already looking for me. My wife had gotten my message. She shared my GPS location from our shared phone plan, and they tracked the truck across state lines. I had no idea, but I had been missing for over 5 hours. The two men were part of a small theft ring luring in truckers, tossing them, and dumping their rigs while they stripped the trailers of whatever they could sell. If the trucker woke up before they were finished, they planned to handle it. I was lucky. No, I was unbelievably lucky. If I hadn't gotten a signal when I did, if the text hadn't sent, I might never have been found. Lessons? Yeah, I learned a few. First, not every stranded driver is really stranded. Second, always trust your instincts, even on a quiet road. And third, a CB radio might connect you to others, but your phone? Even with one bar, it can save your life. So now, when I see a rig with its hood up and a guy waving, I still slow down. But I never, ever get out until I'm sure I know what I'm stepping into. Because next time, I might not be that lucky. There's a saying out here on the road, it's not the darkness that'll get you. It's what waits in the silence. I didn't understand that fully, not until the night the fog came. This happened a few years back, somewhere deep in Mississippi. I was hauling a refrigerated load to Baton Rouge, passing through a long, two-lane stretch of highway that cut through a dense patch of forest. It was the kind of road you don't forget, not because it was pretty or scenic, but because of how isolated it felt. No gas stations, no lights, no cell service. Just the soft crunch of gravel shoulders and blacktop cutting through trees like a scar. It was after midnight when the fog rolled in. Not the kind that drifts in lazily and gives you time to adjust. No, this stuff slammed down like a curtain. 1 second, I could see 100 yards ahead. The next, I couldn't see past my hood ornament. The high beams only made it worse. The light bounced off the fog like a wall, so I switched to low beams and slowed to a crawl. 15 miles per hour. 10 miles per hour. It felt like I was driving blindfolded. I leaned forward, forehead practically pressed to the windshield, trying to make out any hint of road or hazard. My wipers were going even though there was no rain, just mist thick enough to make everything slick. That's when I saw her. At first, I thought it was just a shadow. Something in the fog, maybe my eyes playing tricks. But then the shape moved. A woman, standing dead center in the middle of the highway. She was wearing a light-colored dress. White, maybe pale blue. It fluttered slightly in the wind. Her hair was long and dark, hanging wet and limp over her shoulders. And she wasn't moving. No flailing arms, no attempt to flag me down. Just standing there, still as a statue. I slammed on the brakes. The truck skidded slightly, but came to a stop just in time, about 20 feet from her. My heart was hammering in my chest. I blinked. She was gone. No footsteps. No running. Just gone. I leaned out the window, craning my neck, scanning the fog. "Hello?" I called. "You okay?" No answer. I turned on my hazard lights and climbed out of the cab, flashlight in hand. The beam cut through the mist just a little, revealing nothing but wet asphalt and a gray haze. I walked around the front of the truck. No sign of her. No body. No blood. Nothing. And then I heard it. Click. The sound of my passenger side door opening. I turned, heart leaping into my throat. Someone was climbing into my cab. I sprinted back, boots slipping slightly on the wet pavement. I pulled myself up into the cab, flashlight raised, ready to swing. And stopped. She was sitting in the passenger seat. Calm. Still. Hands folded in her lap. "Jesus!" I barked, startled. "Are you okay? What are you doing in here?" She didn't answer. She didn't even look at me. Just stared straight ahead at the foggy windshield like she wasn't really there. I reached for my CB mic. "Breaker, breaker, this is Red Wolf. You copy?" Nothing but static. No one around to hear me. Then, from beside me, she whispered, "He's coming." Her voice was thin, weak, like someone who hadn't spoken in years. I turned to her. "Who's coming?" She finally looked at me. Her eyes were wide, unnaturally wide, and she looked afraid. Not of me, but of something else. "He wants the keys," she said. "Don't give them to him." And then a thump. On the driver's side door. I froze. The woman shrank down in the seat, wrapping her arms around her knees, whimpering softly. The thump came again. Thump, thump, slow, heavy, measured. I slid the curtain back just a bit to look. There was a man standing beside the truck. Not a hitchhiker. Not a stranded driver. This guy was massive, easily 6 feet 5 inches, built like a linebacker. He wore a heavy black coat, the kind you'd expect on someone hiking through the Arctic, not Mississippi in summer. His face was hidden beneath a black hood, but what I noticed first was his hand. He had one palm flat against my window, spreading red streaks across the glass. Blood. I locked the door. He knocked again, gently this time. Almost polite. I could hear his breathing. "Hey," he rasped. "I need a ride. Open up." I didn't move. The woman next to me began to cry silently. "I can see you in there," the man said. "I know you've got the keys." I reached down and flipped the ignition. But nothing happened. Click, click, click. Dead. No, 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 come on. I turned the key again. Nothing. "You're not going anywhere," the man said, tapping on the glass with something metal. I looked down. He was holding a crowbar. My pulse skyrocketed. He walked around the front of the truck, dragging the crowbar along the hood, the metal scraping like nails on a chalkboard. "Give me the keys," he hissed. "Give them to me." The woman turned to me again. "If you give him the keys, you'll disappear." I was frozen. My brain couldn't make sense of it. Who was she? Who was he? What the hell was happening? Then something snapped inside me. I dove under the seat, pulled out the emergency battery starter pack, connected it to the ignition leads, and turned the key again. The engine roared to life. I didn't wait. I threw the rig into drive and floored it. The tires screeched. Fog swirled. I didn't even look to see if he was in the way. I just drove. Faster than I ever should have on that road. The fog was endless, the lines on the road barely visible. Eventually, the mist began to thin. I saw trees again. Street signs. Life. I glanced at the passenger seat. Empty. She was gone. Just like before. I didn't stop until I reached a gas station lit up like an oasis. I parked, climbed out, and practically collapsed on the pavement. A worker came rushing over. I must have looked like a ghost. "Are you okay?" she asked. I didn't know how to answer. I walked around to inspect the cab. There, on the passenger door handle, a bloody handprint. And etched into the condensation on the window, like someone had written it with a finger. Thank you. I don't drive at night anymore, and I never stop for anyone standing in the road, because I don't know if that woman was real, or a ghost, or something in between. But I know this. Whatever she saved me from, it wasn't human. There's a kind of silence that creeps into your bones when you've been driving too long. It starts in the hours just after midnight, when the highway has emptied, and the last signs of life fade into black behind you. No gas stations, no open diners, no other headlights in sight. Just miles of road, your own thoughts, and the soft hum of the engine to keep you company. It's a peaceful kind of quiet, until it isn't. Until something feels off. That's how the night started. I was running solo, headed down a rural stretch of back roads somewhere between Birmingham and Montgomery, Alabama. I just passed through a town so small it barely had a name, one of those towns with a single blinking light, a boarded-up bait shop, and maybe 5 houses total. I'd been driving since late afternoon. My back was sore, my eyes dry. I chugged 2 energy drinks earlier in the evening that were now turning to acid in my stomach. I was planning to make it to a truck stop about 40 miles out, grab a few hours of shut-eye, and finish the run before sunrise. But I never made it to that truck stop. The road I was on had narrowed from 2 lanes each way to a single 2-lane path, one in each direction. No divider, just faded yellow lines and shoulderless ditches thick with brush. The tree line was tight, like a tunnel around the asphalt. My brights barely helped. The moon was behind clouds, and it was the kind of dark that seemed to suck in your headlights, leaving you blind beyond 50 feet. I was doing maybe 45 slower than I usually would, but I didn't know the road, and something about the stillness made me cautious. Then I saw them. At first, they were just dark shapes ahead in the road, maybe 100 yards out. I leaned forward, squinting. The fog of fatigue clouded my mind, and for a second I thought it was an animal. Maybe deer. But as I got closer, I saw it clearly. 2 people, lying in the middle of the road. A man and a woman. They were spread out on their backs, parallel to each other, maybe 6 feet apart. The man was wearing jeans and what looked like a white tank top. The woman was in some kind of sundress, pale and torn. Neither of them moved. My foot eased off the accelerator. The truck slowed to a crawl. I remember muttering, "What the hell?" It didn't make sense. A wreck? No debris. No flipped vehicle. Just 2 bodies in the middle of a rural road. No lights, no other cars. I flipped on my hazard lights and stopped maybe 30 feet from them. My engine idled softly, the rhythmic puff of the exhaust the only sound in the silence. I reached over and unbuckled, leaned forward to get a better look. Still not moving. That's when the hairs on the back of my neck stood up. It was instinct at first. That gut feeling truckers learn to trust, the sense that something's not right. The scene was too neat, too perfect. Like they had placed themselves there, deliberately. Both on their backs. Limbs spread in unnatural stillness, as if they were waiting for someone to get out. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw it. Movement. To the right of the road, maybe 20 feet into the trees. I turned slowly, just in time to catch the gleam of eyes in the darkness. A man was crouching between the trees, watching me. He wasn't moving, just crouched like a predator. He was wearing dark clothing, and in one hand, I swear I saw metal, either a crowbar or a length of pipe. That was enough. I threw the truck into reverse and hit the gas. The big rig jerked back, tires whining against the pavement. The cab shook slightly as the trailer shifted weight, but I kept going, fast enough to make space between me and whatever the hell this was. That's when the bodies in the road suddenly sat up. Both of them, like marionettes. The man scrambled to his feet, reaching into his waistband for something. The woman followed, sprinting toward my truck with surprising speed. They weren't dazed. They weren't injured. They had been waiting. It was a trap, and I was nearly caught. I floored it, still in reverse, then spun the wheel hard to the left and angled the rig off into the shoulder. The trailer's tires dipped slightly into the grass. For one terrifying second, I thought I was going to jackknife the load, but it held. I shifted back into drive and slammed the gas. The truck roared. I swerved back onto the road and tore past them on the opposite side, my left wheels inches from the ditch. As I passed, the third man stepped out from the trees and hurled something heavy, maybe a rock, maybe a brick. It hit the side of the cab just under the passenger window with a deafening clang. I didn't stop. I didn't slow down. I drove like the devil himself was chasing me. 15 miles later, I reached a small gas station with a single canopy light and a soda machine that looked older than me. There were no other trucks, but the store was open, and that was enough. I parked crooked in front of the pumps and stumbled inside. The cashier, an older guy with a hunting cap and yellow teeth, looked up and raised an eyebrow. "You okay?" I must have looked like I'd seen a ghost. Sweat on my forehead, white-knuckled and wide-eyed. "There were people in the road," I said. "Bodies. A setup. 3 of them. One had a weapon." His face darkened. "That on 22? I nodded. "You're not the first tonight." My skin prickled. He pulled out a logbook and pointed to 2 other names, truckers who'd come in an hour earlier. Similar stories. Similar stretch of road. "They're picking drivers," he said. "Only trucks. Big, slow ones. Easier targets." I called the police. A deputy showed up 20 minutes later. Took my statement. I showed him the dent from the thrown object. He nodded and took notes, but I could tell from the look in his eyes he'd heard this before. "We patrol it," he said. "But they move fast. Change locations. Haven't caught them yet." He asked if I'd be willing to go down to the station, file a formal report. I told him I would after my run was done. I wasn't about to leave my load sitting at a gas station in the middle of nowhere. He understood. Before he left, he said something I'll never forget. "Next time you see someone lying in the road, don't stop. Call it in. Keep driving." I nodded, but the weight of it sank in deeper than I expected. I finished that delivery on time, somehow. The rest of the drive was uneventful, but I couldn't stop glancing at the mirrors. Every set of headlights behind me looked suspicious. Every person on the side of the road felt like bait. I still drive nights sometimes. The highway doesn't care about your trauma, but I don't stop for strangers anymore. Not without verifying everything first. Because those people weren't just desperate thieves. They were organized. And they were waiting. Not for anyone. For someone like me. And if I'd hesitated even 10 more seconds, I wouldn't be telling this story now. That's the truth of the open road. It isn't just about solitude or freedom. It's also about the shadows waiting just beyond your headlights, shadows that know exactly how kind, tired, and vulnerable you might be at 2 a.m. All they need is for you to care enough to stop. And then they have you. You get used to strange noises when you sleep in a truck. The hum of the diesel engine cooling down, wind slapping the side of the trailer, the occasional far-off howl of a coyote, or even the thud of someone parking too close at a crowded rest stop. But sometimes, there's a noise that doesn't fit, a sound that doesn't belong, and that's when you realize you're not alone out there. I've been driving west across Texas all day, hauling a load of dry goods out of Louisiana. It was a hot, dry trip. One of those days where the highway seems to shimmer like a mirage, where your hands stick to the wheel and you find yourself downing water just to stay focused. The kind of drive that makes your bones ache. I planned to make it to El Paso by sunrise, but I pushed myself too hard. By the time I passed through Odessa, my eyelids were heavy and my reflexes were shot. I knew I had to stop, or I'd be risking more than a late delivery. Around 2:30 a.m., I pulled into a rest area tucked against a scrubby patch of desert. It wasn't much: 2 picnic tables, a busted vending machine, and a row of gravel spaces for trucks. No lights, no security. Just a place to park and get a few hours of shut-eye. There were no other trucks there when I arrived. I killed the engine and sat in silence for a moment, the sudden stillness ringing in my ears. The night was thick with heat. The desert air didn't cool like it should have. Instead, it hung heavy around the cab. Still, I cracked a window slightly and reclined my seat. I didn't bother crawling into the sleeper. I figured I'd be up again before dawn. I was asleep in minutes. I don't know how long I was out when the first tap came. It was faint. A soft, rhythmic tapping, tap, 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 against the back of the cab, just near the sleeper section. I blinked, groggy, unsure if I was dreaming. Tap, tap, tap. I sat up slowly, rubbing my eyes. The tapping stopped. I listened. Nothing. Just the chirp of distant crickets and the occasional desert wind rustling the dry grass. I chalked it up to expansion, metal shifting in the cool of the night. Trucks do that. You learn not to panic over every creak. I adjusted my seat and lay back down. Then came the second sound. This time it wasn't a tap. It was a scraping, like fingernails, dragging slowly across the side of the trailer. I sat bolt upright. I wasn't imagining it. I reached over and flicked on the interior light. My heart was thudding, breath shallow. I leaned toward the side window and peeked out. Nothing. Just darkness. I turned on my exterior floods, the bright LEDs mounted along the trailer's sides. The gravel lot lit up, empty and still. No vehicles. No people. But something still didn't feel right. I climbed out of the seat and grabbed my flashlight. I hesitated at the door for a long second. I didn't want to open it. Didn't want to break the thin barrier between me and whatever was out there. But I had to know. I opened the door slowly and stepped down onto the gravel, boots crunching softly beneath me. The beam from my flashlight cut through the darkness. I circled the truck. There were scratches. Long, thin lines carved into the aluminum siding of the trailer. About waist high. Parallel. Like claw marks. Or long nails. I crouched and ran my fingers over them. They were fresh. Not weathered. Not rusted. Just metal peeled clean. Like someone, or something, had been dragging something sharp across the side of my trailer. I stood there for a long minute, listening. Then I called out, "Hello?" My voice sounded small. Swallowed by the desert. Nothing answered. No movement. No breathing. No footsteps. I climbed back into the cab, locked the doors, and this time, I pulled the curtain between the front and the sleeper. Whatever was out there could stay out there. I lay in bed with one hand on the flashlight and the other near the tire thumper I kept tucked under the mattress. I didn't sleep. I just stared at the ceiling. That's when the tapping came back. But this time, it was closer. Directly above the sleeper. A slow, deliberate tap. 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 Right above where my head was. Followed by a soft thud, like weight shifting. Then something began walking across the roof of the cab. One step, then another, and another. I held my breath. The weight wasn't heavy, more like a person than an animal. And whatever it was pacing, slowly, from the front to the back of the truck, then stopping, directly above me. I thought about opening the curtain, about turning on the floods again. But something inside me said not to. Said that if I stayed quiet, it would go away. The pacing started again. Back and forth. Back and forth. Then silence. I stayed frozen for over an hour. At some point, exhaustion got the better of me. I must have drifted off, because when I opened my eyes again, sunlight was bleeding through the edges of the curtain. Morning. The tapping was gone. The silence, however, felt even heavier. I climbed out of the cab as soon as I felt safe enough. The early sun was low in the sky, casting long shadows across the gravel. I did another walk around. The scratches were still there, but now there were more of them on the roof this time. I couldn't reach that high, but I could see them in the reflection of the sun. Jagged streaks across the top of the cab like someone had been dragging their hands or claws back and forth for hours. I walked to the back of the trailer, still half expecting to find someone hiding. But there was nothing. No footprints. No tire tracks. No sign of a car or even a person. Just me, my truck, and the wide-open desert. I didn't report it. What would I say? I stopped at a rest area and someone crawled across my truck all night scratching at it? No one would believe me. Hell, I wasn't even sure I believed it. But I didn't sleep at that rest stop again. Never even drove that route again if I could help it. I started parking at well-lit truck stops with cameras and people. Even if it meant driving an extra hour. Even if it meant being late. Because out there, in the deep hours of the night, there are things that wait in the stillness. Things that scratch. Things that tap. And whatever was on my truck that night, it wasn't looking to hitch a ride. It was testing the walls. That's the kind of thing that sticks with you. Not the roar of an engine, not the scream of tires, not even the close calls with drunk drivers. No, it's the quiet things. The sounds that don't belong. And the feeling, deep down in your bones, that when you turned off your lights and pulled the curtain shut, something else was already there. Rest stops are supposed to be safe. That's what you tell yourself. Anyway, when you're dead tired and half delirious after driving for 12 hours straight. When the road begins to blur, and your eyelids feel like sandpaper, any pull-off with a trash can and a place to park feels like salvation. But it's also when you're most vulnerable, when your guard is down, and when something or someone decides to make a move. It was a little past midnight when I pulled into a rest stop just off I-25 in southern New Mexico. It wasn't one of the big, well-lit travel plazas with showers and vending machines and half a dozen rigs lined up. No, this was the bare-bones kind. Just a strip of gravel along the side of the highway, a single row of concrete parking dividers, and two cracked streetlights, only one of which worked. Still, I was beyond exhausted. I'd been hauling heavy equipment out of Arizona and had already pushed longer than I should have. My vision had started to double, and my hands kept drifting on the wheel. I needed to stop, even if just for a few hours. There were 2 other vehicles already parked, one beat-up pickup truck with a camper shell, and what looked like a sedan with tinted windows, parked near the far edge. No movement. No lights. Fine by me. I backed my rig into a slot beneath the flickering street lamp, set the brake, and powered down the dashboard. The world went still. No engine rumble. No air brake hiss. Just the quiet groan of metal settling and the endless hum of crickets outside. I locked the cab doors, cracked the window for ventilation, and pulled the curtain across the front. Then I crawled into the sleeper, collapsed onto the bunk, and passed out almost immediately. I don't know how long I was asleep. Could have been 20 minutes. Could have been 2 hours. But something woke me. Not a sound, exactly. A feeling. The kind of cold jolt you get when your instincts scream, something's wrong. I opened my eyes to darkness. The cab was pitch black. The flickering light outside must have finally died. My heart was already pounding, even though I hadn't heard a thing. I stayed still, listening. And then, tap, 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 on the window. Not loud, just gentle, deliberate. My breath caught in my throat. Another tap, a pause. Then the sound of someone testing the door handle. Click, click. Locked. A whisper of relief. But it vanished just as quickly. I heard footsteps, soft, crunching slowly on gravel. Then another sound, more distant, a second pair of feet. There was more than one person out there. I sat up slowly, easing toward the curtain, trying not to make a sound. My hand found the tire thumper I kept under my bunk, just in case. The footsteps moved around to the back of the trailer. Then something hit the rear door hard. A metallic bang, like a crowbar slamming against the latch. Then another. And another. They were trying to get in. I didn't have time to think. I yanked the curtain back and climbed into the driver's seat, fumbling with the keys. My fingers shook as I tried to jam them into the ignition. I dropped them once, cursed under my breath, found them again. The engine roared to life. And suddenly, the night was chaos. I saw movement in the mirrors, 3 figures, all in dark clothing, scattering from the back of the trailer. One sprinted toward the driver's side door. I caught the glint of something metal in his hand, a rock, or maybe a brick. He raised it. I threw the truck into drive and slammed the gas. The tire shrieked, kicking up a cloud of dust and gravel. The figure vanished from view, and the truck lurched forward, barreling out of the lot and back onto the empty highway. I didn't stop. Not for miles. I drove like a bat out of hell, eyes wide, heart racing, checking every mirror for headlights. But the road behind me stayed black. Only when I was a full 30 miles down the interstate did I pull into a brightly lit truck plaza, park near 3 other rigs, and kill the engine. Then I just sat there, hands shaking, breathing hard. What the hell had just happened? The next morning, after a restless nap, I checked the truck. There were scuff marks on the trailer door. Scratches near the latch like someone had tried to pry it open. One of the rear corner lights was cracked. And the driver's side mirror? A faint smear of blood, like whoever tried to bash it and had missed, or I'd taken off just in time. I reported the incident to the state patrol at the next way station. They jotted it down but didn't seem surprised. The officer who took my statement just shook his head. "You stopped at the 148 pull-off?" I nodded. He sighed. "You're not the first. We've had a few drivers come through with similar stories. No cameras. No patrols. We think it's a group. Maybe locals, maybe transients, trying to jack cargo or steal the truck." "Why there?" I asked. "Because no one expects it," he said. "No one thinks anything bad happens in places that boring." He wasn't wrong. I've slept in a lot of places since then. Truck stops, Walmart parking lots, even shady motels when things got desperate. But I never, ever stop at isolated rest areas anymore. Not if I can help it. Because whoever those people were, they weren't just opportunists. They were coordinated. They moved like a unit. They knew where to hit and how. And if I hadn't woken up when I did, if my keys had been a little harder to find, if the engine hadn't turned over immediately, I don't think I'd be sitting here telling you this. That night taught me something most folks outside the industry don't understand. It's not the long hours that'll get you. It's not the boredom, or the fatigue, or the loneliness. It's the silence right before the sound, the moment just before the tap, and the knowledge that somewhere out there, under the same sky, someone is waiting, watching, ready to move the second you let your guard down.